IFW Radio, another reason why freight is great.
Thanks for tuning in to IFW Radio, the voice of the freight and logistics industry. I'm Kizzy Nkwacha, and in a few minutes I'm going to be joined by Damien and Kat, who'll be bringing you a roundup of some of the biggest breaking stories from the world of freight. But before I do, just want to say that if you haven't done so already, you really must get your tickets for the IFW Awards coming up in November. I've got to say, if you're lucky enough to get a ticket for the awards, you're going to be in the company of some of the most influential names in freight and logistics. And also, don't forget, another hidden bonus is that you get a chance to meet the IFW team. You get a chance to meet myself and the rest of the IFW team for free. Well, actually not for free, you've got to buy a ticket, but you know it's worth it. But before you book your tickets, here's Damien and Kat with a roundup of the weekly news. See you soon. Bye.
Hello and welcome to another edition of IFW's weekly podcast, our news roundup of the top stories from the last week. I'm Damien Brett, IFW's chief reporter, and joining me in a minute with Kat's countdown of the top most read story will be Kat herself, who is another reporter on IFW. So pretty busy week this week. Actually, no, that's a lie. It's been quite a quiet week on the news front. In journalism, we have this phrase we call the summer months silly season, because you tend to get all the kind of wacky stories making in the paper because there's nothing else to report on, because everything goes quiet. In Britain, the government and Parliament breaks up for the summer. In Europe, everyone seems to go on holiday over kind of a similar period, so there's not much happening there. So yeah, not much been going on this week. But anyway, there have been some interesting stories in IFW. Now, every week I sum up a story which I call my story of the week. This week I'm doing a bit of a follow-up on last week's story, and that was about CMA CGM, who introduced a Qingdao port surcharge for their services to North Europe, Russia, the Baltic countries and the UK, for calling it Qingdao because they said it was affected by fog, which was increasing their costs. The surcharge was $125 per TEU on all shipments, so it's quite a lot. But anyway, I don't know if you remember, but last week I raised the question of why it was charging this surcharge to shipments going to North Europe, but not to its other services. So I asked CMA CGM why this was, and they explained. They said that. Sorry, I'm just looking through my notes now, see if I can find what they said. They said that as well as services from North Europe to North Europe from Qingdao, services to the Caribbean were also subject to the surcharge at the same rate. But they said the Trans-Pacific services calling at US ports weren't, and they explained that because the rate recommending group, the Trans-Pacific Stabilisation Agreement, which is basically a carrier group where they get together and recommend rates for the trade, although carriers do not have to agree them. But as they're part of that, one of the requirements is they have to give clients 30 days notice of any surcharge. So they reasoned that by the time they introduced this fog surcharge, Qingdao port surcharge, the fog would have gone and it would have defeated the point of doing it, which is kind of fair enough. But at the same time, you can see why some shippers and freight forwarders offering services to North Europe would be a bit annoyed because they're paying for the fog, whereas other people aren't, and that also doesn't include their services. They've also got services to the Mediterranean and Central America, South America, which also aren't going to be implementing the surcharge. So you have to kind of question why it's specifically aimed at people who are taking cargo to the Caribbean and North Europe. It seems maybe a bit unfair, but who am I to say that? Anyway, So I just thought I'd do this week. I'll just do a quick follow up on that, and I'll hand over to Kat now for her. Oh, I also have to mention that the IFW Awards entry deadline has been extended. It was supposed to end last Friday, but we've extended it another 2 weeks because of popular demand, and already this is a record-breaking IFW Awards. So if you're a large freight forwarder, an NBOCC, or you fit into any of the other categories, make sure you get an entry in, because it's going to be a great one this year. Anyway, that's enough from me. Here's Kat.
Thanks, Damien. Now on to the top 5 most read stories of the week. So the 5th most read story of the week, with 618 views, is Military Moves by Maersk. So Maersk Line has won a contract worth up to $126 million to operate 5 container and ro-ro vessels for the US Navy and Marines. It was awarded by the Military Sealift Command and Marine Corps Logistics Programme and will begin in September. It consists of a base period of 30 days and 4 one-year options. The carrier said the Bobo-class vessels would carry equipment and supplies to ensure rapid availability during military and humanitarian relief operations. The 4th most read story of the week, with 619 views, is that new effort to raise charges on Asia-Europe. Tighter operating conditions on the Asia-Europe trade, having pushed some players out of the market, are prompting carriers to a new attempt to bring in peak season surcharges next month. Falling rates have forced several start-up carriers to exit the market in the last 2 months, according to analyst Alphaliner. Now CMA CGM has become the latest carrier to announce a series of peak season surcharges and a rate restoration programme for the 1st of August on its Asia-Europe services, following previous failed attempts. The carrier said it will impose a peak season surcharge of $250 per TEU on its Asia-North Europe trade, a rate hike on its Asia-Mediterranean trade of $250 per TEU, plus a peak season surcharge of $25 per TEU on services from Asia to the Mediterranean. It will also introduce a series of overweight surcharges. On its Asia Black Sea, East Mediterranean, North Africa trade, the line plans to charge an extra $200 to ship a 20-foot container weighing over 20 tonnes and $270 if it is over 26 tonnes. And from Asia to the Western Mediterranean and Adriatic, an extra $50 per 20-foot container over 20 tonnes will be charged. The 3rd most read story of the week, with 806 views, is Agility vows to carry on fight against overcharging claims. Kuwait-based logistics firm Agility has vowed to continue the fight to prove its innocence in a dispute over the US military supply contract, despite a setback last week. Agility has been hoping to avoid prosecution for allegedly overcharging the US military for supply services on the grounds it had not legally been served with a notice of summons and indictment by the Justice Department. But on Tuesday, the US Court of Appeals declined Agility's request for a review of the District Court's ruling. In response, Agility pointed out that its request for the case to be dismissed on the grounds that it had not been legally served with notice was still ongoing. It added it was also committed to resolving the dispute through dialogue, but warned it was prepared to defend itself vigorously if discussions were not fruitful. In November 2009, it was charged with allegedly inflating prices and defrauding the US government of at least $68 million while supplying troops in Kuwait, Iraq and Jordan. The 2nd most read story of the week, with 873 views, is Analyst hits out ocean carrier schedule data. The new research has revealed that schedule information provided by some ocean carriers is questionable. Analysts see Intel's latest investigation looked into how easy it is to use scheduling tools provided by the 15 largest global carriers. It concluded that scheduling tools are not very easy to use, with one carrier refusing Intel access to its schedules because they were confidential. Meanwhile, some carriers provided different information to the same vessel on shared services, said Intel. The analyst measured carriers on 8 parameters, ranging from whether they offered point-to-point lookup services, mobile applications, or drop-down boxes to ensure correct spelling of port names. OOCL was the only carrier among the top 15 that received a full score. Intel said almost all the carriers provided basic information such as service rotations, but when it came to cut-off times and cargo availability, which the analyst believed was vital information for shippers, very few carriers supplied this data. At 1,722 views is more shipping lines axed services out of Asia. More shipping lines have axed Asia to North Europe services as the battle to push up rates on Trans-Pacific trade lane steps up a gear. Late last week, MSC, Maersk Line and CMA CGM announced they had cancelled their annual Jaguar service this year. The joint peak season extra service between Shanghai, Ningbo, Los Angeles and Shanghai, operated by 5 Maersk vessels, was due to be launched at the end of May and had already been postponed. Last week, the line said the service would now not run until May 2012. Also last week, Hainan Pan Ocean Shipping and TS Lines decided to scrap their joint TP1 service, which had been launched in May with 4 3,000 TEU ships. Then they cited losses. The move reduced the number of joint trans-Pacific services offered by the carriers from 3 to 2. In June, the New World Alliance, APL Hyundai MOL, announced the suspension of its Pacific Southwest service, which deployed 5 ships. And CSAV has also suspended its 11-vessel trans-Pacific service, citing declining freight rates and doubts over future demand levels. Also, earlier in the year in April, the container ship company decided to cease all its operations on the trans-Pacific trade because of pressure on freight rates, weak volumes and increasing oil prices. Right, so that brings us to the end of our weekly news roundup. For more news, you can visit the IFW website at ifw-net.com, or alternatively, you can take part in industry discussions by tweeting us at twitter.com/ifwnet, or by liking our page on Facebook, which is facebook.com/newsifw.
IFW Radio, another reason why freight is great.